Welcome to Serial Killers with Ben Carter. I'm your host, Ben Carter. The pattern of Nathaniel White's crimes seemed as much a part of him as his DNA. A chilling dance of death that began with a casual encounter, moved to deception and capture, and ended in brutal murder. This pattern, this morbid signature, was as consistent as it was terrifying. But where did such a pattern originate? What twisted paths did White's life take that led him to become a serial killer? Born in 1960 in New York, White grew up in an unstable and abusive environment. His mother, a single parent, found herself unable to provide for her children and was often absent. This left young Nathaniel and his siblings to fend for themselves. He was constantly surrounded by violence and neglect, themes that would later feature prominently in his heinous acts. White's school records paint a picture of a troubled child, a boy who struggled academically and socially. He was frequently in trouble, not only for his poor grades, but also for his disruptive behavior. His teachers noted his penchant for violence and his inability to form meaningful relationships with his peers. Yet these were the early signs of a psyche that was slowly fracturing under the weight of a harsh, uncaring world. White's crimes were characterized by a brutal and almost ritualistic violence. He didn't just murder his victims, he mutilated them in a manner that suggested both a deep-seated rage and a shocking lack of empathy. White himself attributed his violent tendencies to a scene from the science fiction film RoboCop 2. He claimed that the movie had given him the idea to cut open his victims and examine their insides, a gruesome detail that sends shivers down the spine. But psychology suggests that such a level of violence is rarely triggered by a single event or idea. Rather, it is the result of a complex interplay of environmental, psychological, and biological factors. The seeds of White's violent tendencies were likely sown in the chaos and violence of his early years, nurtured by neglect and abuse, and finally blossomed into the horrific acts that shocked the world. In the case of Nathaniel White, one cannot help but wonder about the role society plays in the creation of a monster. Could his descent into violence have been prevented? Could an earlier intervention have changed the course of his life? These questions, while unanswerable, serve as a stark reminder of the collective responsibility we bear towards the most vulnerable among us. In our next segment, we delve into the grim details of White's crimes, exploring the events that led to his capture and the aftermath that shook the community to its core. In the heart of Hudson Valley lies a small town named Middletown, New York. It's a place that belies its sinister past with its picturesque landscapes and quaint houses. This was the setting of Nathaniel White's gruesome crimes. The town, which thrived on agriculture and small-scale industry, was a tight-knit community where everyone knew each other, and crime was a rare occurrence. The time was the late 80s and early 90s, a period marked by economic shifts and social changes. This was a time when the world was grappling with the end of the Cold War, the rise of the Internet, and the introduction of DNA fingerprinting in forensic science. But for the people of Middletown, these global events were overshadowed by the fear and horror brought about by a local menace. Socially, Middletown was not immune to the challenges of the era. The city was struggling with rising unemployment and increasing crime rates. The economic downturn had hit hard, leading to an increase in drug use and violence. The town, once peaceful, was slowly being tainted by the desperation and disillusionment of its inhabitants. It was against this backdrop that White committed his horrific crimes. The town's struggle with socioeconomic issues likely exacerbated White's own personal struggles, pushing him further into the abyss of violence and depravity. The disintegration of the social fabric around him may have mirrored the disintegration of his own psyche, resulting in a deadly combination that would ultimately lead to tragedy. During this time, the community was gripped by a palpable sense of fear. The horrific nature of the crimes, the brutality inflicted on the victims, and the seemingly random selection of targets created an atmosphere of terror. The fact that the perpetrator was one of their own, a man who grew up and lived among them, only compounded the fear and shock. The social climate, characterized by fear, uncertainty, and suspicion, was a stark contrast to the town's otherwise serene and peaceful ambiance. The gruesome murders shattered the community's sense of safety and trust, casting long, ominous shadows over the town. In the midst of this terror, the local law enforcement and community members rallied together, determined to apprehend the perpetrator. Little did they know that their efforts would lead them to the doorstep of one of their own, revealing a chilling portrait of a man whose monstrous acts belied his seemingly ordinary exterior. As the terror unfolded, the first known victim was Juliana Frank, a 29-year-old pregnant woman. White encountered Frank in March 1991 when she was hitchhiking. He offered her a ride, but instead he took her to an abandoned farmhouse where he brutally beat and strangled her. Tragically, her body was not discovered until early April, only intensifying the fear and unrest that was beginning to permeate the town. Just a month later, in April 1991, White struck again. His next victim was Christine M. Klebb, a 14-year-old girl who had run away from home. White met her at a local convenience store, and he lured her into his car with the promise of a safe place to stay. He drove her to the same abandoned farmhouse, where he committed the same horrific acts of violence he had inflicted on Juliana Frank. In May 1991, White's dark urges led him to victim number 3, Brenda Whiteside, a 20-year-old woman. Brenda was seen last with White at a party. He later confessed that he had taken her to his trailer, where he killed her. Brenda's body was found in White's residence, marking the first time that the killer's lair was revealed. The summer months of 1991 were marked by 2 more victims, sisters Angelina Hopkins, 23, and Laurette Huggins Riviere, 34. The sisters were last seen with White at a local bar. They were murdered in the same depraved manner, their bodies discarded at the now infamous farmhouse. The final victim was Adrienne M. Hunter, a 27-year-old woman. Hunter was murdered in August 1992, almost a year after the sisters. She was last seen with White, who had offered her a ride. Her body was found in the field near the farmhouse, marking the end of White's gruesome spree. Each of these victims was a tragic loss to the Middletown community. The terror was not just in the violence inflicted upon them, but also in the randomness of their selection. White seemed to choose his victims without any discernible pattern, sparking fear that anyone could be next. These women, who were sisters, daughters, and friends, were caught in the crosshairs of a man whose capacity for violence was seemingly insatiable. Their lives, ended so brutally, left a lasting scar on the town of Middletown, a grim reminder of the predator in their midst. The sense of security within the community was irrevocably shattered, replaced by a chilling fear that would take years to dissipate. White's escalating crimes had not gone unnoticed by law enforcement. The discovery of Brenda Whiteside's body at his residence in May 1991 was a turning point in the investigation. It was the first time law enforcement had connected him to a murder scene. The local authorities were now aware that a serial killer was at large, and they had their first lead. The New York State Police and local law enforcement agencies formed a task force to investigate these crimes more intensively. They started by reviewing missing persons reports, cross-referencing them with the victims. They also began to scrutinize White's background, his movements, and his known associates. White, however, was not deterred by the increasing police attention. He continued his horrific spree, claiming the lives of the Hopkins and Riviere sisters over the summer. The method of killing and the location of the bodies, the abandoned farmhouse, pointed unmistakably towards a serial killer. The farmhouse became a focal point of the investigation, a grim monument to the tragedy. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, law enforcement got their big break in August 1992. The discovery of Adrienne M. Hunter's body in a field near the farmhouse brought White squarely into their sights. Once again, White was the last person seen with the victim. This, coupled with the similarities in the victims' profiles and the manner of their deaths, solidified White's status as the prime suspect. Following Hunter's murder, law enforcement acted swiftly. They brought White in for questioning, and his chilling confession to all 6 murders followed. The reign of terror that had gripped Middletown for over a year was finally over. White's subsequent arrest, however, did not immediately alleviate the fear that had gripped the town. The details of his heinous crimes, laid bare during his trial, only served to heighten the sense of horror. The community's trust in their fellow citizens had been irrevocably shattered, replaced by a pervasive sense of unease. Even as the legal proceedings against White moved forward, the town of Middletown had to grapple with the painful reality that such a monster had lived among them. As the investigation continued, a clearer image of the murderer began to form. Nathaniel White, the prime suspect, was not a newcomer to the world of crime. His criminal record, while not extensive, painted the picture of a man with a predilection for violence and transgression. His first felony conviction came in 1987 for unlawful imprisonment, a crime that already hinted at darker impulses lurking beneath the surface. The behavioral patterns that became evident during the investigation further supported the growing profile of White as a methodical and remorseless killer. The choice of victims, all women of varying ages, suggested a deep-seated misogyny. Their abduction and murder were not haphazard, but rather marked by a chilling level of premeditation and planning. Each of his victims was someone White knew, which only added to the chilling nature of his crimes. He would offer a ride or invite them to his farmhouse, exploiting their trust before committing his horrific acts. The farmhouse, a place of isolation and seclusion, further facilitated White's control over his victims, highlighting the manipulative control he exerted. Forensic psychologists involved in the case began developing a psychological profile of White, based on the behavioral patterns that were emerging. They posited that White exhibited characteristics of a power control killer, a subtype of serial killer who derives satisfaction not from the act of killing, but from the domination and control they exert over their victims. White's crimes were marked by this control aspect, from the initial manipulation to gain trust, to the act of murder itself. His victims were always alone and vulnerable when he struck, and he would often physically overpower them, adding an element of control and dominance to the violence. The psychological profile also suggested a lack of empathy, typical of psychopathy. White seemed to be incapable of feeling any remorse or guilt for his actions. His chilling confession, delivered without a hint of regret or sorrow, was a testament to this. As the trial moved forward, this image of White as a cold, remorseless killer, driven by a need for control and dominance, became increasingly substantiated. His crimes, while shocking in their brutality, were also characterized by a chilling level of calculation and manipulation. Nathaniel White was more than just a murderer. He was a predator who had lurked among the community, exploiting trust and vulnerability to fulfill his darkest desires. The case against Nathaniel White was not just founded on the chilling confessions he made, but also on the solid forensic evidence investigators had gathered. The breakthrough came when investigators matched tire tracks found at the murder scenes to White's vehicle. At the first crime scene, they discovered a unique tread pattern, which was identified as belonging to a type of tire that was not widely used. This was a significant lead, as it narrowed down the pool of potential suspects. When investigators examined White's vehicle, they found it was fitted with the same distinctive tires. Further forensic examination of the tires revealed traces of soil that matched the samples taken from the crime scenes. Then, investigators found a treasure trove of evidence inside White's farmhouse. They found items belonging to the victims, including jewelry, clothing, and personal items, which White had kept as trophies. This behavior was consistent with the psychological profile they had developed, further cementing their belief that they had apprehended the right man. The most damning piece of evidence, however, was the DNA analysis. Samples taken from the victims and the crime scenes were compared with White's DNA. The results were conclusive. White's DNA was a match, providing irrefutable evidence of his guilt. Witness testimonies also played a crucial role in the case. Several witnesses came forward, recounting instances where they had seen White with the victims before their disappearances. Their testimonies corroborated the evidence, painting a chilling picture of White as a master manipulator who used his familiarity with the victims to lure them into his trap. One pivotal moment came when a woman who had narrowly escaped White's clutches testified. Against the backdrop of the horrifying details she revealed, the courtroom held its collective breath. Her testimony not only substantiated the brutal methods White employed, but also gave a voice to his victims, reminding everyone of the human lives brutally cut short by this remorseless killer. The combination of rigorous forensic science, corroborating witness testimonies, and a clear psychological profile painted a damning portrait of Nathaniel White. The evidence was overwhelming, leaving no room for doubt about White's guilt. The cold, calculated method of his crimes, his chilling lack of remorse, and the damning physical evidence all pointed to one conclusion. Nathaniel White was a predator who had disguised himself among his prey. As the trial progressed, the courtroom became a microcosm of the broader community, a fusion of anger, fear, and an overwhelming desire for justice. The public followed the case with bated breath, each revelation only adding to the shock and horror that was already palpable. Media outlets flocked to the courtroom, their coverage feeding the public's insatiable appetite for developments in the case. The prosecution laid out their case meticulously, presenting each piece of evidence with surgical precision. The defense, for their part, seemed to be fighting an uphill battle from the start. With the overwhelming amount of evidence against him, White's legal team had little to work with, their primary goal seeming to be damage control. The trial was marked by emotional testimonies and chilling revelations. With each witness that took the stand, White's guilt became more and more apparent. The woman who had managed to escape from White's clutches took the stand again, her voice shaking as she recounted her harrowing experience. The courtroom was silent save for her voice, her words painting a vivid picture of the terror she had endured. The atmosphere was thick with emotion. The spectators moved deeply by her bravery. When the time came for White to take the stand, the courtroom was filled with an uneasy anticipation. He showed no remorse as he testified, his cold demeanor sending shivers down the spines of those present. His testimony was met with disbelief and disgust, his lack of remorse only adding to the public's disdain. After weeks of proceedings, the jury was tasked with deliberating on the fate of Nathaniel White. The deliberation was surprisingly quick, reflecting the overwhelming evidence against him. When the jury returned with a verdict of guilty on all counts, the courtroom erupted into a mix of relief and grim satisfaction. The consensus was clear: justice had been served. The public reaction to the verdict was a mix of relief and revulsion. The trial had exposed the true nature of Nathaniel White, a man who had hidden his monstrous inclinations behind a facade of normalcy. The discovery of his guilt, while providing closure for the victims' families, sent shockwaves through the community, shattering their sense of safety. White's crimes served as a chilling reminder of the hidden dangers that can lurk within even the most seemingly peaceful communities. There's a term in psychology called the dark triad. It refers to a trifecta of personality traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Experts speculate that Nathaniel White might have exhibited all three. Narcissism can manifest as a grandiose sense of self-importance and a lack of empathy. White's chilling lack of remorse, his seeming inability to understand or care about the pain he caused, could be indicative of this. It's almost as if he viewed his victims as nothing more than objects for his own gratification. Machiavellianism refers to a tendency to manipulate others for personal gain. White deceived, manipulated, and controlled his victims, using their trust against them in the most horrific way possible. He exploited his charm and charisma to lure them in, demonstrating a calculated coldness that is often associated with Machiavellianism. Psychopathy, the final piece of the dark triad, is characterized by impulsive behavior, a lack of guilt or remorse, and a disregard for the rights of others. White's horrific crimes and the cold, emotionless way he carried them out seemed to align with these traits. His inability to feel empathy towards his victims, his lack of guilt or remorse for his actions, paint a chilling portrait of a man who was seemingly incapable of feeling the basic human emotions that bind us together as a society. Yet, to attribute White's actions solely to these personality traits would be a gross oversimplification. Childhood trauma, past experiences, and underlying mental health conditions can all play a role in shaping a person's behavior. White's upbringing, as we said before, was marked by violence and instability. His mother was reportedly abusive, and his father absent. Psychologists believe that such an environment can lead to a distorted sense of self and others, creating a psychological framework that makes it easier to justify violent acts. Furthermore, while not diagnosed, some suggest White might have suffered from antisocial personality disorder, a condition characterized by a long-term pattern of disregarding or violating the rights of others. This, coupled with his possible narcissistic traits, could have created a potent cocktail of psychological conditions that led him down his dark path. But it's important to remember that countless individuals experience similar conditions and never resort to violence. Many people suffer from personality disorders, endure difficult childhoods, and yet do not become killers. The mind, with its complexities and intricacies, remains a mystery. The mind of Nathaniel White, a man who committed such heinous acts, is a terrifying enigma. A chilling reminder of the depths to which the human psyche can plunge when pushed beyond its limits. Once the trial was over and the grisly details of White's crimes had been laid bare, the towns of Middletown and Goshen were left to grapple with the aftermath. The wounds inflicted by White's spree ran deep, cutting through the fabric of these tight-knit communities and leaving a lasting scar on their collective consciousness. The impact on the victims' families was, of course, devastating. They were left to mourn their loved ones, their grief exacerbated by the brutal manner in which they were taken from them. For these families, the pain would never fully dissipate, the memories of their loved ones forever tinged with the horror of their final moments. The survivors of White's attacks, too, were left with their own scars. They had to grapple with the trauma of their experiences, their lives forever changed by the terror they had endured. The public nature of the trials, the media frenzy that surrounded the case, only served to compound their suffering. For these individuals, the shadow of Nathaniel White's crimes would loom large for the rest of their lives. The case also had a profound impact on the wider community. The sense of security that once characterized these small towns was shattered. Residents were forced to confront the reality that such horrific violence could occur in their midst. This realization was a bitter pill to swallow, shaking the community's faith in itself and its trust in others. The media, too, played a significant role in shaping the aftermath of White's crimes. The case was widely reported, not just in local newspapers, but in national and international outlets as well. The salacious details of the crimes, the shocking nature of White's actions, made for compelling headlines. This media coverage, in turn, only served to heighten the public's sense of fear and unease. In the years that followed, the story of Nathaniel White has been revisited time and time again. Books have been written, documentaries made, all seeking to understand what could drive a man to commit such horrific acts. Yet, despite all of this attention, the true nature of White's psyche remains a mystery. The legacy of Nathaniel White is a disturbing one. It's a stark reminder of the depths of human depravity, a testament to the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most seemingly ordinary individuals. It's a legacy that continues to haunt the towns of Middletown and Goshen, a chilling echo of a past that, no matter how hard they try, they can never fully escape. Despite the intense scrutiny, there are aspects of Nathaniel White's life and crimes that remain enigmatic, elements that have defied explanation and continue to fuel speculation. His sudden escalation in violence, from a history of petty crimes to horrific murders, still baffles many criminologists. What triggered this abrupt transformation? What was the catalyst that pushed him over the edge? These questions remain unanswered, adding another layer of intrigue and horror to White's story. White's choice of victims, too, has been the subject of much discussion. While some see a pattern in his selection of young, vulnerable women, others argue that his victims were chosen at random, that they were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. This lack of consensus, this inability to definitively profile White's victimology, has added to the unease and fear surrounding his crimes. The question of whether White acted alone has also been raised. While he was the only one ever formally charged, there were whispers, rumors of an accomplice, or perhaps even a wider network. These theories, though largely dismissed by authorities, have never been conclusively disproven, leaving a sliver of doubt that continues to gnaw at the edges of the narrative. Perhaps most haunting of all are the implications of White's crimes for our understanding of human nature. His actions challenge the comfortable notion that evil is easily recognizable, that it is outwardly marked. White was an ordinary man, a neighbor, a co-worker, even a friend to some. Yet beneath this facade of normality lurked a capacity for unimaginable cruelty. This is a chilling reminder of the potential for darkness that resides within us all, a reminder that is all the more unsettling for its implications. The story of Nathaniel White is thus a chilling blend of known facts and lingering questions. It's a tale that continues to captivate and horrify, a stark testament to the depths of human depravity. As much as it is a story of a man and his monstrous acts, it's also a story of a community forever scarred, a justice system challenged, and a society forced to confront the darkness that can lurk behind the most ordinary of facades. The echoes of White's crimes continue to reverberate, a chilling reminder of a past that refuses to be forgotten. Thanks for listening. This has been Serial Killers with Ben Carter. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show, subscribe to the Forbidden Knowledge Network on Patreon. Subscribe now.